Hey, welcome back to the channel. This is Leo in color, but this time in black and white. Let me show you how I turned this simple audio adapter into this slick looping animation. I'll break down how I tackle the modeling, texturing, and most importantly, that stunning animation that adds life to it. Even though I'm not a musician, teenage engineering has always inspired me with its minimalistic design. In this video, I'll show you how I turned one of their simple adapters into something a little bit more interesting to look at. I love recreating small gadgets designed like this, but this approach can be used with anything really. Take the most mundane object you can find and try to think of it as an art director. You could ask yourself, how can I show this product in the best light? How can I make it shine? What are its unique characteristics? And those are the questions I ask myself for this project. Right, so far I show you the blocking stage, but now let's get started with modeling. This time it shouldn't take too long. This is a cylindrical object with different radius sizes along the way. Using a reference as a base from the Teenage Engineering store, I'm going to redo the steps I did when creating this asset. I created two versions of the model, one that contains the silhouette of the prop and the higher density version that contains the smoother edges and the knurling texture. This way, when I jump into animation, it won't be so intense on my machine. To get the knurling texture on the metal, I created a high poly version of the prop and did that in the modeling stage this time. It could also be done in texture as a normal map or even displacement, but I wanted to keep it simple this time. So I'm using the traditional baking high poly into low poly workflow. If you're interested in seeing how I model those knurling details, make sure to let me know in the comments section down below and I can make an in-depth video going through all the details of how I approach this texture in modeling. Now for the UVs, I thought it would be better to separate them based on the materials. There is the smooth metal from the top part, then the knurled metal on the bottom part, where the user will take the adapter from, so that section will have to have the feel that has more grip. There is this black metal in the inside of the adapter, and finally the paint over the metal sections of the port. So you can see that I cut the mesh based on those. I'm not thinking of efficiency here. Since this is a 4K map, I didn't worry about packing UVs tightly. It's all about quality this time. We can afford to lose some space in the UVs because there are plenty of pixels for the texture to work with. If you're enjoying the process so far and getting real value out of this video, please consider subscribing for more 3D breakdowns. So for the baking process, you can see that I'm only baking the normal map, the ambient occlusion, and the curvature. And I'm adding some secondary rays to the ambient occlusion and the curvature to add some softness and more detail to the transitions. This will basically allow me to keep the low poly version with the details of the high poly model. And you can see that here, if I paint the polys, I'm selecting big rectangles and not getting into all the crevices and little rhomboids of the knurled metal. Right, once it's done, I moved over to texturing, and again, I made it pretty straightforward here. With one base metal for the entire piece, then I used the same material for the inside of the adapter, but turned the color to black. I added a very subtle noise to the roughness of one of the rings. I applied another roughness and an ambient occlusion layer to the knurled metal to contrast it even more with the smooth metal. And finally, I added two black stripes on the top part. Here in the outputs template, you can see that I created a preset, which is the one I use most of the time to export everything from Substance Painter. The key is that I'm combining different maps like ambient occlusion, roughness, and metal into the same image. Using RGB channels, you can have more information than only one image. If we jump quickly into Photoshop, it might look messy at first, but once you separate the channels, it's a clean and efficient workflow. Here is the base color. This is the normal map with all the high poly details baked into it. And here the combined map. In red, you have ambient occlusion. In green, you have roughness. And in blue, you have metal. Great, so far we covered model and texture, and now it's time to bring it to life in Cinema 4D. Arnold is the render engine I always use, and I find it gives me natural results and it's so simple to use. With minimal adjustments to the settings, you get great results. Actually, it's the one I learned to use the first, which could also be why I stick to it. For this scene, I used a simple infinity background and an HDR dome light to achieve this soft lighting with minimal setup. And because I didn't want the lights to affect the background that much, I give it a light gray color and a bit of emission, so it will take the role of fill and backlight at the same time. In this project, I wanted to explore also different aspect ratios, and I went with an ultra-wide 21:9 because I want to accentuate even more the movement from right to left of the props. Everything will be composed in the middle third of the screen. That's pretty basic, but I want to bring interest to this project with motion this time. I'll go ahead and plug all the materials to this shader. And here is where you can see how I connect the different channels: ambient occlusion, roughness, and metallic by specific channel. I actually made a mistake connecting the roughness. I connected it to the diffuse roughness and should be connected to the specular roughness. That's a quick fix though. But one thing I did notice, and I came back to adjust, was that the ambient occlusion wasn't connected to the base color. Then I created a layer node and plugged the base color to input 1 and ambient occlusion to input 2 and changed the blending mode into multiply. Then lower the opacity of the entire layer so both maps blend nicely as the final base color. If you're interested in seeing more of my work, you can visit my portfolio, leoincolor.com. That's where you'll see more of my 3D projects. You can also follow me on Instagram at leoincolor. But if you really want to help the channel grow, the best way to do that will be to like this video and subscribe to the channel. To replicate this prop multiple times, I used a cloner and added 28 copies with 75 centimeters of distance from each other. Not that 28 is a perfect number, it's just high enough so the animation can start and finish, and there will be adapters visible on both sides. Here is how the final animation looks, but let's start from scratch and I'll show you the steps I took. Here I'm just repeating the same steps from before, 28 copies with 75 centimeters of distance. I set up the X parameter of the entire cloner to start at -325 and to finish at -925. I don't want this parameter to have any ease again. I want this motion to be linear. Same as with the rotation, I'll set it up to start again at -70 and to finish at -370. Quick tip here, if you press Shift F and Shift G, this will take you to the first and last frame of the composition. That's very convenient if you want to compare the first and last frame to see if the loop will be seamless. Then I moved the H rotation parameter, and here is where it gets more interesting. I made the adapters to rotate in 45 degrees steps, from 0 to 45, then back to 0, then to -45, and finally back to 0. I added a simple ease to the curves, because this time I do want the speed of the animation to variate. This will give that out-of-tempo feel to the entire animation. Adding slight variations to the speed of the adapters, I think makes them slightly unpredictable, which makes the entire piece a bit more engaging. But what do you think? Do you think this adds enough interest, or would you have done this differently? Drop your thoughts in the comment section down below. Now, I think this is looking great already. And how about if we add some text to this composition to make it a little bit more like a motion graphic piece? We could render the adapters and the background separately and compose everything later on in After Effects for sure. But doing this in render adds realism, in my opinion, as the text reflects naturally on the adapters while they are turning, right? I'll create a text object using Helvetica and type the input of the adapter, which is 6.35 millimeters. Make some adjustments to the text styling and putting into position. Then I'll start creating the shader for the text. First, I actually tried a metallic material. I added some roughness to it. I don't quite dig this gradient that gets, from darker to brighter on the top. That's because the dome light is affecting it. But after some experimenting, I decided that actually I'll prefer to go with fully black, remove the metallic, and just keep it as black text behind the adapters. What do you think? Should I have stayed with the metallic one, or does the black one work better? Yeah, and here you'll see me kind of like tweaking and finding the final details for this project. I'll try to upload videos more consistently into this channel because I have many projects that I never actually showed other than the final results. So I found that these breakdowns are pretty helpful for me, kind of like to review all the steps and see where I can improve. Also, I think it's good to show how things are done so we can demystify the 3D workflows and show that they are not as complex as they may seem. If you have any recommendations or you would like to see some specific videos, just let me know in the comments down below, and I'll do my best to read and respond to all the comments. A final touch I tried here was adding depth of field, so the plane of focus would be over the adapters and the text will be out of focus. I find that this could be quite demanding on the render and would definitely extend the render time from 1 hour that it took to render this into several hours for sure. So I ended up removing it and keeping it simple, everything in focus. Once everything is ready to export, there's nothing more satisfying than pressing that render button and seeing how Arnold renders each frame. And for the ones who made it all the way till the end, here's the final render. Simple jack adapter turned into a sleek looping animation, showing that even the most ordinary objects can shine with the route approach. If you enjoyed this video and learned a thing or two on the way, please consider subscribing for more 3D breakdowns. Now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.